going to be on the schedule for ETSU in 2020-21? Here's a thought on that and some more ETSU news. Hello, I'm Marky Bilson. We know this on the ETSU schedule. Remember, before he left, Steve Forbes promised kind of a monster schedule, that there'd be tournaments the Buccaneers would play in, that they would play an SEC team at a neutral site, this sort of thing. We know this. We don't know the dates, but we know a trip to Mississippi State is in the works next year. Bulldogs under Ben Howland 2011 last year in the SEC. Interestingly enough, ETSU lifetime 3-1 against Mississippi State on the hardwood. A couple of Sunbelt teams. Remember the series with Appalachian State, that series renewed. Got to go to Boone next year. Little Rock will come into Johnson City. Little Rock was 21-10. That could have been the high-ranking mid-major that Steve Forbes was talking about coming into Johnson City next year. Who knows? The Trojans out of Little Rock. And then a real easy trip to Cleveland State. I say that because the Vikings have endured 5 straight seasons of 20 or more losses. This isn't the same program it was when Kevin Mackey was there. And, of course, they visited recently to Johnson City, so the second half of that one-on-one. My suggestion, see if you can get that game scheduled early, Jason Shay, because you'll want your team with no starters to, well, have not serious challenges coming forward. You'll want, the easy matchups to build up for cohesion's sake, that sort of thing. Plus, oh boy, I mean, it can get cold in Cleveland in December. November, yeah, it can too, but you get a little bit, well, never you mind. Trip to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Hey, I'm never a real big weather guy. Well, we know those 4 teams, but this thought, Bo Hodges, he's off to Butler. Davian Williamson has announced his transfer destinations, and he is not saying he's staying at ETSU, so he's a goner. No starters returning on next season's ETSU Buccaneers. So why do you want to schedule tough? I think Jason Shay may actually say, you know what, those games, those were Steve Forbes games. These are my games. And I wouldn't blame him at all, because the ETSU administration gave him a bonus that he's got to win 25 games to get his contract automatically renewed. Now, if you were in that situation, you were working with just a 3-year contract, not a 4-year contract, and I thought that that was a major slight to Jason Shay. But if you were doing this, then wouldn't you schedule soft? Wouldn't you try to bring in as many Cleveland States as you possibly could to play the Buccaneers? One interesting thing, the 25 victories, it's against D1 teams. So you got to have D1 teams to beat. You can't load up on the Milligans and the Hiawatha's. Wanted to then talk, though, a little bit about the player that is still at ETSU, but he isn't, Davian Williamson, last year's point guard. A lot of people think that with Mac McClung going to Texas Tech, this is going to open up the spot at Wake Forest. That we know that Wake Forest is on the transfer list, if you will, of Williamson. But now that McClung has said he's going to go to Texas Tech, and he's looking to play point guard, I'm wondering, well, what's the holdup then? Why hasn't Williamson made his commitment yet? The longer it is not announced that Williamson is going to Wake Forest, I think the better the chance that, say, a San Diego State or someone like that will get his services. Interesting, because Williamson, of course, from Winston-Salem. But here's a thought. What would that mean to, well, just a little bit of the coaching staff-player relationship with ETSU these past few years? Obviously very successful on the hardwood, but let's face facts. Steve Forbes, and for that matter, Jason Shay, they're the guys that it does appear played Mladen Armus with a concussion in the SoCon tournament a couple of years ago. These are the guys who, after Forbes leaves, and it's like, well, we're going to have his top assistant. If Williamson doesn't follow to Winston-Salem after Forbes if he goes somewhere else, away from his hometown, away from the ACC, and he's not staying with Shay, that doesn't really indicate that there was a really strong bond. Now, the local product, the one player returning from last year that had a significant impact for the Buccaneers, Patrick Good, he is returning. But, of course, he's from Johnson City. He's from David Crockett, right? So, I mean, and I know they play in Jonesboro, but the mailing address always said Johnson City with Patrick Good. So that's the one guy that's sticking around, and really, he wasn't a starter last year, and he's never averaged more than 10 points in a season, so, you know, his stock is highest locally, where he was the Johnson City Press's Player of the Year for 3 straight years in high school. But you've got to ask yourself right now, the longer Williamson doesn't declare to Wake Forest, the more the chances are that, well, maybe they weren't so tight back then. Maybe it was Forbes, you know, trying to do all the media, all this, that though did create a little bit of a divide, especially when you consider the 2 transfers once the assistant stays on. And if it means that a guy's going to go clear across the country, admittedly, San Diego, yeah, you know, sign me up, please. But admittedly, yeah, San Diego State, but still clear across the country and possibly not play for your hometown team in the ACC with your old coach? The longer Williamson doesn't commit there, the more you wonder. Also, ETSU still, a couple of assistant coaching positions, they're still not filled. And a thought on there, Greg Heyer, top assistant at LSU, had been rumored almost a week ago as one of the potential gets for Jason Shay. Now, if Jason Shay pulls that off, you know, happy days are here again, because Heyer has been listed as the second best recruiter in the SEC by 24/7. He coaches guards. Historically, Shay at ETSU has coached the post players. However, while it does make sense in the idea that, you know, both Greg Heyer and Jason Shay, Midwest guys, Heyer from Dubuque, Iowa, Shay from a small town in Illinois. And while it does make sense because they both used to work at Wichita State, Heyer's last report made $300,000 a year as an assistant at LSU. Last year, Jason Shay was the highest paid assistant coach at ETSU. He made $90,000. That's quite the pay cut. And then you start saying, well, wait a minute here, because here Heyer, he used to work for Larry Eustace, for crying out loud, at Southern Mississippi. Now the idea is, well, the compliance people from the NCAA, they're giving Will Wade and LSU a long, hard look. And his option, if it is to go to ETSU, serious pay cut. Hey, Shay's base salary is only $250,000 to get away from LSU, but to coach under a guy who once had a show cause penalty. You'll forgive me if I wonder if Heyer is really squeaky clean. If he's the guy that you want. Something to watch. Something else. A week ago, a little bit short of a week ago, this story about Heyer possibly to ETSU surfaced. This coaching staff still not filled. Why wouldn't it have happened by now if it was going to happen? So the longer that hire doesn't occur, the less likely, obviously, it is for Shay to be plucking assistant coaches from LSU. Mr. Jennings is still out there. And I know that Jennings told me, you know, I'm not really all that jacked up about those recruiting trips in season and all this. You want the closer, you want the guy to say you can make it here at ETSU. Yeah, there's the guy. Of course, you don't know if he's going to be compatible with Shay and all that sort of stuff, but I'm just throwing it out there. But right now, Shay has an 0-2 count against him as he's trying to, bring in new players to replace Bo Hodges and the eventual transfer Davian Williamson. He's only got one real assistant coach in Trevor Battle and 2 vacant, and only 3 years on his contract. Now, at this time, who is going to sign with ETSU? And they don't know who's going to coach him. And they don't even know if it's a 4-year player, if Shay is going to be there for his entire tenure. He doesn't have the contract. Therefore, look for these 2 spots on the roster, probably to be filled by JUCOs. And probably to be filled once the coaching staff is filled. And you know what? What's taken so long? Folks, I'm Marky Bilson. I invite you to take a look at my YouTube page. Please subscribe to it. Hit the bell. Really helps me out when you do that. And, of course, we have content. Right now, we've been focusing on ETSU, but all kinds of sports. And certainly, I've got the hardest-hitting opinions and the best opinions in the market on ETSU basketball. So, until next time, I'm Marky Bilson.